All right, looks like we've got a great group this morning. Lots of people joining. We really appreciate that. I'm Chris Coppola. I'm the general manager at Kuali, and I'm going to tell you just a few things about the webinar, just some logistics to get us started. Everyone will be on mute throughout the presentation. We'll open up for Q&A toward the end of the session. We'll try and leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. As you think of questions, please ask those along the way. We'll be keeping track of those to make sure that we can get all of your questions answered, some of which we'll do during the webinar. And if we don't get to it during the webinar, we'll follow up with you directly. You'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to enter questions anytime. The webinar will also be recorded, and we'll be sending you a link to that recording that you can share with colleagues who couldn't make it today. All right. Before we dive into the session, I'm going to take just a minute to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Christine. Christine Limesand is the assistant director of sponsored programs at California State University, Monterey Bay. She's worked in research administration since 1990 in both pre and post-award functions. As a relatively new Kuali client, CSU Monterey Bay is using the system for proposal routing and sponsored programs office management of proposal information. Chris Francis has been working in the Office of Research at the University of Waterloo for nearly a decade. He's worked in a variety of positions fulfilling business analysis, system administration, and technical roles as required on different projects. Chris's most recent experience includes implementing the Kuali protocols for human and animal subjects. Waterloo is an early adopter of the new Kuali protocols, and he's been working with Kuali since before the initial release of that product. Gary Wilkerson was a founding member of Kuali's design team and has recently returned from a position leading the UX team at HireView. Gary has 7 years of experience in UX design and thrives on collaboration with users to fuel product development. Liz Christensen is the newest member of the Kuali Build team as the director of business development. She comes to us from a teaching background as adjunct faculty in English literature with a special interest in crime fiction and literary theory. She loves researching and addressing the needs of her customers, still teaching and learning just in a new space. And Victor Kinzer is a customer success manager here at Kuali with over a decade of experience working with Kuali research. He's worked in implementations for over a dozen institutions focusing on all aspects of the implementation process. And Mackenzie Mitchell is an environmental health specialist at Texas State University. So just wanted to take a minute here to thank our panelists. Really appreciate you being with us today and looking forward to the conversation. So let's start at the beginning. How do you, and I'm gonna open this up to all panelists, how do you develop a relationship with your institution's vendors?
I guess I'll jump here and start here. First, we really need to acknowledge that, like with any relationship, it is both sides that are needed to make it a success. A good start begins with a positive, open communication accompanied by an active interest for everyone to succeed. You may want to make sure you're focused on building a team mentality around that. Your institution has its goals, the vendor has its goals. They'll never perfectly overlap, but they can definitely align such that everyone can make their goals possible.
Thanks, Chris.
I would agree with that, sort of speaking from the vendor side of the experience. I find that relationships with the schools that I'm working with tend to be the most productive when the school is coming and they're very vocal about their goals. They're upfront with them, but they're also open to solving them in a number of different ways. So if there's a line in the sand, I need to know that as soon as possible. But also I'm going to come forward with maybe many different ways to accomplish those things. And I find that, you know, when schools are really willing to dig in and be open to change, but have very set expectations of what they need to accomplish, those projects really tend to blossom.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I was just going to mention that, you know, I think that I think openness is key, because from the vendor side, we're trying to work with many different institutions. So we're trying to remain really flexible. So I would just add on to what Victor said, where when an institution sees the benefit in collaboration in the relationship, and understands that we are trying to remain flexible, it really brings out really innovative solutions, especially because one of the things at Kuali that I think we really thrive on is trying to figure out best practices and having institutions share those together as well, and being kind of a facilitator for that.
Well, I've always kind of worked on it from us going to Kuali, and pretty much y'all actually really listened to everything that we've actually had to say. And especially with, I've been working with the design team some and for the new upgrades, and they actually do very well in letting us see those and kind of put in our input of things that we're really needing before they go into the new upgrade, I think is really nice. And especially if they're, because we sit there and talk about all different things, and sometimes we see something that y'all didn't think of, or y'all do something that we didn't realize we need, and that being put into it, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've definitely experienced doing design collaborations with schools. You know, we have a lot of expertise in the business domain, but you know, at this point, it's been several years since I was, say, in a sponsored research office. So while I can bring a lot of my experience at this point, it's a little bit more removed. So having that lived day to day, what's coming down from the federal sponsors right now, how have expectations changed, and really getting that feedback on a very regular basis before we develop anything is incredibly helpful. You know, and just being very open and consistent about keeping that feedback cycle moving makes a big difference.
And I think y'all do a great job listening to us too, which I really appreciate.
That's always good to hear.
Last week, where the designers were talking to us, asking questions of what we need about the dashboard and what factors, what things that we use, our workflow process and whatnot. And then what was interesting to me is then after I presented what I needed or wanted from the system, the designers showed me some of their ideas, which then blew me out of the water, because they were thinking way more creatively than we were. We were just thinking process, and what we need, but the designers were also thinking creatively. And I was really impressed with some of you kind of took it to the next step. And from a campus standpoint, it's also important for us then to be flexible with what you're showing us and presenting to us in terms of ideas. And yes, we have our best practice, and yes, we have the things that we need from the system, but we may not have thought of creatively as to how that might work. And so we have to be flexible too in how we change things to meet that as well. It's a two-way street.
I think that it's incredibly helpful to get the historic perspective on those processes that you've had, where you've come from, how you got there. Why are you going through that process in that manner? What came before? What's the context? So that we can understand, oh, okay, you've developed this process over the last 10 years for these reasons. There's this historical context around it, so that we can come in with creativity and with new eyes at a process, but without the naive attempts that you've already tried before. The context is really important for us to be able to understand.
And that context is one of the things that I try and make sure we share when we're attempting to work with a vendor. It's much more important to know why something's attempting to be accomplished than to say, I need a button here to do X, Y, Z. The vendor can step back and say, we're getting all sorts of different requests. Maybe there's one better solution to all of this, and put all those different ideas together.
Yeah, getting to the root of what the problem is, being able to understand. One of the questions I always ask myself when we're looking at a problem is, why hasn't this been solved before? With all of the technology out there, what is the real root of the problem that we're trying to solve? and the reason why we haven't accomplished it yet, or other companies haven't accomplished it yet. And when we can get there, then we can start being creative.
Actually, I think one of the great things y'all do is actually put in kind of a description of what you're wanting in each of the fields, and like even adding like drop downs in the future, because a lot of the software, I know when we send it out, it's we're seeing it to professors or admins or somebody who might not necessarily understand what business continuity planning is. And so it's kind of good that y'all have the descriptions there that kind of tell us what you're wanting in the field or what kind of needs to go in the field, and not kind of just leaving us hanging out to dry and not necessarily knowing what to put there. Because, I mean, the specialists are not always available, so.
Interesting. The next question I was going to ask is about why collaboration between vendor and institution is important in user-centered design, but you all have been addressing that already, and you've even started to talk about some best practices. But I wanted to offer up for the panelists, if anybody'd like to mention any other specific best practices that you have when it comes to working or communicating with designers. And Gary, maybe you'd like to kick that one off?
Sure. So I guess when it comes to best practices, I can bucket that into 3 ways that we try and do that. So one is discovery. And there's been a lot of talk about this. You know, it's not so much about getting specifics into the UI and what you're looking for. It's about getting into the root of your processes. It's about getting into the root and getting context for why people are doing the work they're doing, what motivates that work, what the obstacles are. So getting an understanding of that really helps with discovery. And what we really try and do is keep that not so much feature specific, but just, again, understanding context. And that kind of leads into road mapping and figuring out what the next best problem to solve is, or the next opportunity for innovation. So once we get into that stage, what we try and do is, as features get developed and as early as we can, we want to get that in front of people who will be using it, you know, or anyone who will be affected by it. So we're actually striving to hit as many roles as we can, so that even if you're not in the software, like if you're affected by it, and if you're affected by these products, getting these things in front of you so that we can kind of check against things. Because this was mentioned a lot about Kuali listening and everything. I mean, it's necessary. It's not just important, it's absolutely crucial for the job that we're doing on the product side. So testing against those. And then the last kind of bucket I would say is validation post-release. So again, part of that best practice is once we get that out to you, we also want to be tracking to make sure if we did actually hit the nail on the head. So that's what I would say best practices are from my end, as far as like how we're trying to tackle things.
Love to hear from Mackenzie and Christine and Chris on this, if there are any best practices that you've picked up in working with designers on the vendor side.
I just think one of the best practices is a lot of times we get to see what the new release is going to be before it comes out. Because I mean, like when the dashboard came out, that was a great thing to me. I manage like over 200 plans, and to be able to just at a glance look at and know what the status of my plans are without having to go through them is great. And even the search bar is great that was added, because then I can go in and type in what kind of plan I'm looking for. I'm not scrolling all the time for that. And then even with the new release, I saw a lot of new things I like that, and just instead of using them just for business continuity plans, we can use for other different practices in our at our university. Because a lot of times we get asked for like evacuation plans or where rally points and stuff are. And now that we put that in the software, we can just print it out. We don't have to sit there and rewrite it every time or remember where it's saved. It's all in one placeholder. So, I mean, definitely being able to see the designs and kind of have our input in them, I think is great. And I especially love that y'all do that.
At CSUMB, I think one of the efficiencies that we have in working with Kuali is we have a point person in our office, Jen Bliss, she has many hats, but one of the hats she has is that she's the main contact with Kuali. we meet on a pretty regular basis. We have a meeting scheduled once a week where we go over quality questions, issues, processes, our internal process. And so before we go to quality, we've worked it out internally. We may have a best practice that we're implementing already, but maybe now with quality, we can do it differently. And what do we need? Should we change the process? Can we be more efficient? And we try to work that out internally amongst ourselves before we take it to quality. So we're not coming at you with 10 different ideas, but we're actually coming with what we think might work the best for all of us.
I'd like to second that. That is something we're doing, and it seems to work out rather well. We'll get in touch with our stakeholders who are affected by an issue, discuss internally, and then take it back to quality after we've done that internal discussion. So we can see how widespread, how important something is before we're reporting it and saying, yes, this is an issue. We know how big of an issue, how many it's affecting, and then we can more accurately say to the designer, this is important, this is a nice to have, and things along those lines.
Well, and one other thing that I wanted to mention, you know, there's the idea of collaborating with a designer like Gary, or someone who's getting in and designing, you know, whole screens, they're designing complete interface pieces. But a lot of our software, Protocols is a good example, which Chris has done a fair bit with. A lot of design and structure is flexible. It can be built out for each individual implementation. And one thing that we found is there are certain institutions that have sort of innovated and gone much farther with that tool than others. And then they're able to share that with the community, either through us or directly. We have one particular conflict of interest forum that one school really spearheaded and went first with, and now I have several different, you know, customers who have seen it and said, okay, our questions will be a little different, but we want to use all of these things that they did. We want to configure it the way they configured it. So there's also a place for the concept of designer to go kind of beyond application design and into configuration design, as flexible as some tools can be.
Thanks everyone. Great dialogue so far. It sounds like one of the benefits one of the threads that I'm hearing about benefits of collaboration is this idea that in discussing and collaborating, new ideas are emerging, either directly through the collaboration between your institution and Kuali, or even with other institutions that you're sharing ideas with. What other benefits have you seen from this kind of collaboration? And particularly, at least initially, I'm interested in hearing from Chris, Christine, and Mackenzie.
So for us, largely the benefits of collaboration are things get developed quicker and better alignment to our business practices. They're quicker because there's less back and forth on designs, because we're bringing all the issues to the table right front and center. It's not, look at this, okay, provide some feedback. It's everyone's getting their hands dirty and really seeing where they can be made better.
I want to include Kuali's speed of response speed, in that we often take questions to Kuali and ideas, and there's really an immediate participation with Kuali. So it's positive. If we run into something as we're developing a proposal, sometimes we're on a deadline, and if there's an issue or a question, or it comes back quickly, and that has been really helpful to have that real quick relationship.
Yeah, I agree with what Christine's saying. Y'all are very good at, you know, anytime we have like a question or something, y'all respond very quickly, and you're definitely into getting our ideas and helping us in whatever way y'all can.
The Kuali team, anything to add? What are the key benefits we've seen from the same kind of collaboration?
I wanted to say, like, that's really good to hear. Within the specifically like the user experience ecosystem, there's this there's this tendency to believe that collaboration can slow down progress. So a lot of companies actually struggle with this. A lot of software companies struggle with collaborating with customers and going through research and doing all that, because it's like if you're having those discussions, then you're not actually working on things. But one thing that Kuali does really, really well universally is we understand that this actually builds momentum. You know, if we can get things in front of our customers and we can get feedback and we can do that on a consistent basis, that does nothing but fuel the work that we're doing. So I mean, the benefit for me personally is it's a basis for how I'm doing my job. Like it's like I said earlier, it's completely necessary, but it makes us faster and it makes us iterative, and it, you know, it really makes us innovative. The other thing I was going to mention, and Christine kind of mentioned this earlier about you being focused on processes and the design team being focused on kind of the creative side. The other benefit this does is it fills in knowledge gaps. So I'm by no means a subject matter expert on anything in higher ed, and I shouldn't be. I think it would harm things, me seeing things like from that lens. I'm kind of a third party, and what I bring to the table is I specialize in usability and interactions. So filling knowledge gaps and kind of having that tension of hearing about processes and how things should work, and me bringing best practices and how usability can work. Like having those collaborative experiences really bring out really innovative solutions, you know?
Eric brought up a good point, because when I was recently on the call with Kuali about the dashboard design, there were several people from Kuali there, designers, but there was also kind of our point person. So when something came up as I was talking about part of our process and what I like to see on a dashboard and how I use a dashboard, the designers were listening, but so was our quality person. So she was able to say, oh, Christine, that's another issue. I'm going to take that one on. We'll talk about that, because that was more of a process question. And I didn't have to repeat it 4 different times to 4 different people, and they were all there. So they all heard, and they could divide it up amongst themselves rather than me having to go to each one of them, which I thought was really good.
Yeah. And I wanted to add, you know, talking a little bit to what Gary said about how people tend to think that collaboration slows down process. One thing that we've really experienced on the research side is, for a long time in certain arenas, if a school needed something, they customized it. Or for a while when we were doing reporting, we were building a lot of custom reports for users. And it resulted in the same problem being fixed over and over and over and over again in different ways. And, you know, yes, each one of those fixes was much faster than it would have been for collaboration, but collectively it was a lot more time. And over the last couple of years, we've really moved heavily towards, let's take the time and collaborate and meet and find a fix that works for everyone. And while it does take a little bit of time, it's taking a lot less time than collectively was invested previously. It took a while to kind of get there. There is kind of a threshold you have to reach where you're doing enough of it that you see returns, but we're really seeing those returns now and doing a lot of contributions back from the community into our code base, which is another form of collaboration. And it's really accelerating value that we're able to deliver to schools that wouldn't have had the resources to tackle those things on their own, and we're able to get all of that together. So it gives you a path forward that's much more sustainable, because you're not maintaining so many different things.
Well, and ideally the collaboration goes back and forth from the beginning of designs all the way through adoption. And one of the great benefits that we've seen is in that adoption process, when we can continue to collaborate and watch our end users use the product and just physically observe them use the product. It continues to help our design and designers reach that usability, right? Reach that user experience that helps the adoption. We want our products to be adopted, not just used, right?
Well, and I think one of the things you'll do really well as your software is you make it very user friendly. So people that are not very technologically advanced or understand what the subject is can kind of move around and kind of figure out how to use it on their own. And they're not having to send a lot of questions, or how do I do this, or how do I do this? And especially with the new way it's being designing, it's going to make it even a lot more easier, as in it's kind of like you click on one thing and then it moves you through, and it even tells you how much time it is. Because that's even great if I'm trying to review something, because I know how long it's going to take, and I know, well, I can review all these sections today, and then tomorrow when I have more time, I can review the lengthier sections. So I just think that that's great that it's just very, very user-friendly, and every time I see an upgrade, it's like you're making it even more user-friendly.
And I think that's where that comes from is like you said, Liz, like we want adoption to happen. So, I mean, from the design side, if I could spend half my time looking over people's shoulders using the software, I probably would, and take notes and figure out improvements. So that's also a plug. It's an open invitation. So
and that's where we really
always recruiting, Gary.
Us out as your customer, we can do that very well. Look over people's shoulders, see what they're doing. And touching back to what Victor said, once you do have enough of this collaboration going, sure, initially it feels like there's a lot of front-loaded work, but the returns in the end are definitely worth it from what we're seeing.
So this is kind of implied in a lot of the benefits that you all have been talking about, but I find it's useful to be more explicit about it. Can you talk about how this collaboration that we've been discussing has an impact on students and faculty, teachers, and researchers?
We really don't have any students that use the software on our end. We use it more for business continuity, so we're more like on the faculty staff side. And it's actually it's easy for them to use, but it's going to get easier for them to use as the new updates come out. But they're able to kind of go through it at their own pace, as when students aren't in the office or anything like that. But they're kind of able to go through it and kind of figure out what needs to go in each spot from the helpful hints that y'all have provided, and then they just contact me when they have when they can't figure it out from there. But other than that, they're kind of able to walk through it on their own, and then they just ask me to kind of review it and make sure all the information in it's correct. They're not having to ask me what goes in every blank and what should go here and what should go there. And they make it, and it's also very easy for them to upload their own information. And so, they basically upload their own information. I'm starting to ramble, but anyways, it just makes it very easy on them for stuff like that.
For us, we're still implementing, so we are still very early on in the stages. Students probably won't be affected. They're probably not going to really be in the system much, maybe for human subjects, but that's probably it. Faculty aren't the only people that are in the system now. Are chairs and deans and proposal reviewers. So we have not that many people in there using it yet, but the people that have been, we were doing paper routing with paper. So now people are, the faculty, the chairs and the deans who have been using it have liked it. They can do it on their phone. They don't have to be physically present to review a proposal. And in the beginning, we'd get some questions, but they're on board and they know what they're doing, and it was easy for them to implement it.
For us, we're definitely much more dedicated to our ethics staff and with the protocols module. But what we've seen impact or I've personally seen impact where an update happens in the system, I'll get notified that the change has happened. I haven't got to testing it yet. And before I get to testing it later that afternoon, 4 or 5 people from our ethics staff will say, "This is working fantastically. I love this." And it's the sort of thing that you just are excited to see as someone working on the system.
Yeah, so one thing that I've really experienced with students and faculty is what will benefit students and faculty varies a lot from institution to institution. And I'm going to use a couple of examples. I'm working with one school right now on protocols, and they have an existing IACUC and an existing IRB, or animal research and human research program that they're using. They want to move away from it, but everyone at the institution is used to loading everything into a system. I'm working with another school that's very small that has everything as paper. They don't have an admin. Their committee chairs are really doing the admin work. They're very, very lean. And what each of these schools want and need for their students and faculty is very different. You know, if the small school were to do a great, big, huge integrated form, then it would overwhelm their researchers. So they're doing a much smaller form. They're still doing some attachments because that's where their culture is. Whereas the larger school that already has a system is more interested in, this is what we're used to doing. How can it be better? Let me talk you through what their current experience is. How can we improve that workflow with your form designer? And having been through design process with designers like Gary and representatives from multiple schools, and having been through that collaboration process, I'm then able to think back on those conversations, look back at those references and say, okay, this is what other schools in similar situations have found to be really beneficial. And I can share that with these schools, absolutely not deploying similar solutions for these two institutions, even though it's the same program. So there's a library of institutional knowledge that develops as you continue this work. And it does really trickle down to optimizing what's best for a particular faculty member, a particular student in their institution's environment.
I've been thinking about one of our customers who wants to replace their current system, but they're using Kuali Build experimentally. They in their past system, they just implemented it and then started trying to adopt it and started trying to use it throughout their system, and it didn't work the way they wanted it to. So with Kuali Build, they're holding it in reserve and they're testing things over and over again and then changing it. Oh, we don't want to do it that way. Let's change it. Let's iterate. Let's evolve. And they're not going to deploy it until they get there. It was one of the things that they liked about Kuali Build, that they could implement it just step at a time, change it again, over and over again until they get how they really want to use it at their institution instead of just a wholesale implementation.
It's really powerful.
I was just going to say, from the curriculum management side, the interesting thing I keep thinking about as everyone's talking about this is, students aren't interacting with the software. But as we talk to all of our contacts and going through these collaborative iterations and everything on curriculum management, all of their motivations are around student experience. And the students are impacted by what we're doing. So a lot of what we're doing is around making sure that work is meaningful, making sure that we're creating software that takes over tedious work, so that the humans behind this process are doing very meaningful work. And they're doing the things that need to be hands-on. And with that, it kind of frees up for more meaningful, impactful work that does actually affect the students downstream. And that's been really exciting to see. On the research side, so I contributed some to research in the past. It's interesting because COI may have been the most interesting thing I worked on, because a lot of the administrators—
That's conflict of interest, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, so as we worked on conflict of interest, though, a lot of the administrators that we talked to, one of their biggest pain points was researchers don't want to go in and do conflict of interest. It keeps them from doing the research, but it's absolutely necessary. So a lot of what we were doing there, too, was trying to make an impact and making it easy and quick. And Christine, like you said, making it accessible on their phones, or just making it quick so they can go in and do it. That's the kind of impact that I think we've been after. So yeah, I mean, even downstream impact is really, really important to us.
I'm going to speak a little bit to CM, even though that's not my product, but when we talk about student experiences and what stresses them out, what are their stressors? And one of their stressors are just getting the classes that they need.
Right.
You know, the semester is starting, they're not in the right classes. And I had an experience last year where I was teaching a British Lit class, And for some reason in the course catalog, they had it listed as an American Lit class. And as you know, English majors are slated. And so I had all of these students show up to my class who thought they had signed up for an American Lit class. And I needed it changed right away. And I called my admin and said, hey, this is British Lit. It's always been British Lit. What's going on? Who wrote this? And she said, just get into the Kuali CM and change it. Just send it up the chain. And I didn't know, because didn't pay attention to my emails, that I could do that. And I said, I can do that. She goes, yes, do it today. Get it done. And it was done. And it seems like a silly thing that impacts students, but I had a classroom of panicked students. And if we're trying to engage in a student experience, then one of the things we want to do is reduce those beginning of semester stressors.
Yeah, well put.
Thanks, Liz. And you were talking about Kuali's curriculum management.
Yeah, curriculum management.
Yeah. Great. Thank you all. I'm going to move on to a little bit of a different take on this. So the collaboration we've been talking about, can you have the kind of impact and results and engage in this collaboration without being a technical expert?
I'll take that one real quick. Again, I'm not a technical expert, and I go out on site with my customers, and they are also, one of the goals of Kuali Build is to be able to put this product in front of admins and in front of faculty, and they would be able to use it. And so I have sat down next to admins, and I watch them use it, and then we talk about it. We see where their pain points are, and their feedback is invaluable to us because they are our end users. And so we need that non-technical feedback, that collaboration. This is what I need. This is what would work better. This is what confuses me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. All of that is incredibly important.
Yeah, I would mirror that. You know, not to downplay technical collaboration. I think it can also be very beneficial, but I think especially when we're collaborating with an institution, we know our technology. We know it really well, but we need your expertise in the subject matter domain. We need your expertise to say, I know that looks like a cool feature, but it's not going to add any value in my life. It just adds white noise. Or this is nice, but if you could tweak it just like this, it's going to make my life 10 times easier. You know, we need that information and testing feedback. You know, the response to the designs is really important. But then when we develop it, going in and really using it and getting really, really rapid feedback on testing and saying, this is my experience. This is what's really happening. Oh, this made sense, but now I have it in front of a student who has a perspective I didn't even have, and here's what they're telling me. That's the most useful part of collaboration, is having a really rapid feedback cycle around those items. And I think being technically minded can actually get in the way of some of that. So I think it's really important to have very functional users taking part in the process.
I do think there is value in potentially having collaboration on the technical side and the code side, but we definitely are trying to stay away from that at our institution, because that user experience portion does feel like the best thing that we can spend our time conveying, and providing that level of feature testing and feedback is going to be much more valuable than us committing a designer of some sort to writing some function. Or the code is a good way to collaborate if you're able to. It's all about lending to your strengths that you're able to share.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to blow up the question, but by saying I'm not a technical expert, but I'll mirror what Liz said. Like, I'm not sure I consider myself a technical expert. I mentioned earlier filling knowledge gaps and you know, getting subject matter experts and talking to as many roles who get impacted by the process on the institution side as being very important. What I didn't mention is that we do our very best to also do that internally. We have technical experts who are in the code. We have really, really good engineers. And they've come and been on calls with us, and they've done on-sites with us, and they should continue to, because again, it's about knowledge sharing, and they offer a perspective. Our customer success representatives offer a perspective that I'm just not going to have. So it's like Victor said, I think it helps not to be a master of everything. I think what really, really helps in collaboration in general is having some tension and having different perspectives, so that you can build off of each other, you know?
It's really like a triangle. I mean, you need the design for the user, so make it easy and friendly to use and convenient and efficient. And you need the code, obviously, coders, the technical people, to really to make it happen. And then on the research side, I mean, there are just things that we need to do, like Gary mentioned, conflict of interest. It's a thing we have to do, not something we want to do, but we have to make it happen. And so it's the design and the coding that then makes it happen in an efficient and user-friendly way. But there are certain things you just have to get done. So, and the designers and the coders, they need to know that, what we have to do. So all three of them have to work together, really.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I have one more question for the panel, and I just wanted to take a minute and remind everyone, you'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I've seen a few questions come in. We will transition to participant questions in about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less, depending on this last question. So please go ahead and enter any questions that you have there, and we'll get to those here shortly. So the last question is about, I can see from the responses, hear from the responses in the dialogue so far that it matters to each of you. And in particular, I'm thinking about our institutional partners, but I know that it's true for the Kuali panelists as well, that it matters to you that a vendor asks for your input and actually uses that in our design and development process. But the question here is why? Can you talk a little bit about why that matters to you?
One of the things that matters to me is that I can understand what the program can and cannot do. Like one of the things that I want to do is, because I actually use Kuali Ready, which is more the business continuity software. One of the things I talked about with the design team is batch emailing, just because that would make it easier on my life. And they said, yes, they're working on batch emailing, but that takes longer to build than the interface. So being able to talk to the technical people and the design team kind of lets me know is you're hearing what I'm saying, but it's going to take a little bit longer to get to than some of the other options that might be a little bit easier to build out. It's coming, but it's just not going to be there immediately. But at least it lets me know that it's something you're working on. And it's not just, going out into La La Land or something like that. But at least I know I'm being heard, and it's something that you're working on and seeing if it's even possible, which I like to know because it means I'm being listened to.
I think that sums it up perfectly. We, as an institution, like to feel that we're being heard and that our concerns are being addressed, and that when they are taking longer, we have an idea that yes, they're taking longer because it's going to be done right, not done quickly.
At the end of the day, my goal is to help faculty submit proposals. And it's like anything else with technology. You find something, a software, an app, where it helps your life, makes your life better, and it's cool. We like this. If it's something that's going to make it harder for me to submit a proposal or to help faculty or workflow increases because of the technology, then I'm not going to be excited about it. And so having that feedback is so important because it can really make our workflow better. It can make the faculty's lives easier, and the proposals are being submitted more efficiently. I'm all for that.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a few questions coming in. I'm gonna start with those now. And again, just a reminder for participants, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Click on that and you'll be able to enter questions through chat, and we will get to as many as we can today. So thank you for your questions. The first question that we have is from Rogers O'Neill, who is in the registrar's office at Concordia University. And the question is, can the university easily add new data elements that it needs, modifying input screens to put new fields on them, and program the screens to check for appropriateness of the entry, so that if a student switched majors from electrical engineering to history, it would automatically change the school from engineering to A&S. And I think I'm going to direct that one to you, Gary, given your familiarity with curriculum management, since this seems to be in that area.
Yeah, so Victor kind of mentioned this earlier, that we're not just designing out the software, but we're trying to design out the configuration. So all of the entities that you set up within curriculum management, you're able to customize and name them whatever you want. And then we have a form kind of back end feeding those entities, and those are fully configurable. And we're constantly trying to update that configuration based on a lot of the discussion we've had, knowing what institutions are needing. So yeah, I mean, we have a whole builder that we work very closely with institutions on to make sure that they have the right inputs, to make sure that we have all sorts of diffing in place, so that when new proposals come in, it shows what the differences are from the old entity versus the new proposal. So yeah, I mean, they're highly configurable, as well as the workflow they go through for approval. So hopefully that answers the question. Great.
And Rogers, if you have any follow-up, please feel free to enter that in the Q&A. It sounds like, I mean, from the dialogue, it's clear that you all, and when I say you all, I'm thinking of the panelists, institutional partners, and Kuali folks are collaborating fairly regularly. Can you talk a little bit more about how often is this kind of collaboration happening?
For our office, I think Jen works with them every day. I'm not sure, I'm not the point person, but I do think she has some contact with Kuali pretty much every day. But even myself, who I'm more of an end user, I could put in tickets if I need attention, and I get feedback right away, and there's emails that go back and forth fairly regularly.
Yeah, so my experience is pretty specific to the research product, but we have a number of design partners that we're interacting with weekly, or maybe even more often, to do collaboration. But then even, all of the institutions are invited to take part in user groups that we hold, and the user groups focus on the major functional areas within the research domain. So we have pre-award, post-award, COI, and protocols. Sometimes there are subgroups. We had a subaward group for a while. We have a reporting group. Wherever there's an area where we're about to do a lot of work where collaboration would be beneficial, we create a group. They generally meet once a month. If that cadence needed to be different, we might change it, but really it's once a month. And there are certain institutions that really have a strong culture of collaboration that show up, they give their feedback, we show designs there, we demo features. And, then we also have, public demo environments where users from those groups can go in and test features, even if they aren't implemented at their institution, and give feedback. So we have kind of, I want to say organic. I mean, it definitely takes some maintenance and upkeep, but we have what's set up as a pretty ongoing, heartbeat of our day to day that is built on a foundation of collaboration. So it's pretty constant for our team.
Yeah, and it's the same for us, just depending on who the contact is. So we have customer success, we have support specialists that are constantly in contact. Our product manager is constantly in contact, and usually I'm a part of those conversations. I try and do this as much as possible. And whenever I figure out where to put my number in my email, again, I'm going to put it in there and we'll hang out all the time.
I think we have our formal ways of collaboration, and then we have our ad hoc ways of collaboration. And so one of the reasons why I'm here today and not our designer or our PM is because right now, currently, is our design advisory board. So that's a formal once a month meeting with our design partners, the institutions that we have design partners with, and our product manager and all of our engineers and our designer are in that meeting with our design partners and talking about needs and how to meet those needs a little bit better. But then we also have the ad hoc that Gary and Victor have talked about, where we have a Slack channel with our customers, and they can Slack the engineers, they can Slack our product manager and our designer. And I know our designer extraordinaire, Dan, is in constant contact with our customers. And when he whips up a design, and he whips them up, when he whips up a design, he immediately tests it with our customers, and then, comes up with an iteration based on their feedback. So I would say both formal and informal constant contact and collaboration.
Very good. Okay, we have a question coming in. This looks like it's a research-oriented question that is about. It seems like it's a question that involves both local collaboration within the institution in different areas, and also with the vendor. So the question is about best practices or best approach for implementing when implementing a new financial system that would be related with the Kuali research, when the new financial system stakeholders don't have that same kind of investment in Kuali research. Victor, this might be a perfect one for you if you have any advice for Kevin.
Yeah, so this is definitely something that I've worked through before, both for financial systems and HR systems. We have kind of integration points with both, pulling in a whole user base so those users can get in and use Kuali research, and then also pushing information from grants into the financial system. Really, the biggest thing that I can promote is be as transparent with those groups as possible and contact them as early as possible, and really communicate your needs. Because sometimes if they don't understand the need, they don't really want to open up their data. They don't want to, they don't really want to engage in a project. Maybe they weren't planning on having people committed, and they do need to provide some resources. I've definitely experienced pushback. So when you're bringing in a new group and you don't know what the buy-in is yet, just budget extra time and be as transparent about the reason for the integration as possible. Really explaining, here's the benefit this is going to provide, here's why we need this, as opposed to, we want to do this thing, we're doing it. I've seen a school or two take that approach, and it does tend to make things more difficult. So really a lot of the things we talked about early on in terms of establishing a good relationship between a customer and a vendor, you're in a situation where you're a customer with another department in your school. And so you're doing all of those same things within your organization. And it is important to make sure you've set enough time and resources to relationship build when you're doing that kind of work.
Thank you, Victor. Chris or Christine, do you have anything to add to Victor's advice?
Not really. We're still early in the process, and we haven't gotten to that point yet. So.
And we're strictly on protocols at the moment, so I don't have much there.
Right. Okay. Well, Kevin, if you have additional questions or want to discuss that further, reach out. We'd be happy to talk through that with you more. Looks like we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to just take this quick opportunity in between to thank our panelists, Chris, Liz, Gary, Mackenzie, Christine, and Victor. Really appreciate the engaged conversation this morning, this afternoon almost for all of us. And then also wanted to thank all of our participants. It's great to see so many join us for this. It's a really interesting and important topic to us. And with that, we have a couple more minutes and we do have some more questions. If we didn't get to all of your questions, we'll follow up. We'll also be following up with a recording of the webinar that you can share. And I'd like to just use the last couple of minutes. If you have to go, please feel free, but we'll use the last couple of minutes to address one more question. So this question is about, Kuali uses where we deliver our software from the cloud in a SaaS model. And we use a method of delivering that software that is continuous. In other words, as we're engaging in the kind of collaborations we've talked about today, and we're improving the software, that your users see those improvements quickly. They're rolled out in the cloud and they're rolled out frequently. This question is, once the system is up and running, do we have to install updates that are distributed? And so I'm not sure the best person to talk about that. I'm going to open it up to a couple of the Kuali folks. And if nobody's feeling like they have a good answer to that, I'll take it.
I can talk a little bit about what that looks like on the research side. The short answer is you do have to install the code updates. The longer, more complicated answer is you don't have to use them all the time. We are a continuous delivery setup, cloud setup. So whenever we have validated code, it's been through our internal testing and QA process, it gets pushed out to customer instances. That's really a few times a week. In theory, it could happen on any night, but realistically, we don't. It's usually 2 to 3 times a week. A lot of those features, though, are designed in such a way that a customer might never see them if they don't activate them. So as an example, on protocols, we initially released protocols with the option to amend a protocol or the option to renew a protocol, and certain schools wanted users to be able to do both at once. So we rolled out renew and amend. Everyone got that code change, but you have to go into your configuration and turn it on before your users see it. And so wherever possible, wherever it's appropriate, we're developing features that way. So you get the newest version of the code, you get any stability, security enhancements automatically, but big features like that you may or may not want, you don't have to use. There are other changes, where it is going to go out. In the form designer, we have a list where a person can add, say, multiple procedures or multiple, say, personnel on a project, and they can fill out a form several times. We've been consistently iterating and improving on that, rolling out fixes to spacing, responsiveness, slight changes in UI design. So a user knows, I have to keep scrolling on this subform. I know there's more information. Those are just general UI improvements. And as they're ready, we do roll them out. They do appear for everyone immediately. So it's a back and forth on that. And when we have large feature changes, we engage with the user groups and talk with them about the upcoming changes and say, is this something everyone wants? Is this something, what sort of configuration are you going to need around this? So that's part of that consistent collaboration that I mentioned earlier to identify how we need to roll certain things out.
Perfect. Thank you, Victor. And thank you again to all of the panelists. We're just past the top of the hour. Really, really appreciate you sharing your experience and expertise and insights. And thanks to all of the participants